Hello and welcome back to another episode of KSP POV, where we play Kerbal Space Program in first person. So today is a little bit of a cursed episode. We go and we make an attempt to do Mun landing, but due to some problems, about half the footage got lost. It's just the testing phase, which is fine. That was, it was all third person and everything. We tested whether or not we could land the lander. We tested whether or not the lander would survive re-entry. We tested the lifting mechanism of it. Oh, I forgot to even mention we actually designed a lunar lander. That was also part of the footage that got lost. So really apologize about that. This one was actually a really fun one to design. We ended up calling it the Phoenix. So yeah, so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. I threw on some extra solar panels just the last minute, some extra batteries, because that was one of the things in our testings that we had to contend with, was a lack of enough electrical charge. So this is the lander. It's very heavily science-based. We've got our life supplies stuck in there in the side underneath the radiators. I'm setting the parachutes. That was another thing that I had forgotten to do, that the test had let me know. I didn't arm my parachutes, which would have been disastrous. So we can't have that. Can't have a disastrous mission now, can we? So yeah, as I said before, there was a problem. I actually ended up my computer ended up crashing completely at one point, so the footage we'll get there. Here we are, just setting up our warnings. I like to just, even though they say that they're on from the beginning, I like to click them again, just because sometimes you'll not hear a warning. Go get our vessel view placed up. All of our screens, kind of, the typical that we always do, very standard. Which, by this point in the series is it's good that it's standard, because it's becoming like the pre-flight checklist is already in my head. Since we're going to be landing, I'm going to try to use that map. We've got it. Might as well have it open somewhere. Yeah, so we lift off. We're not using all of our thrusts. Learned that keeping it from going too fast, too quickly is better for ascent, because then we don't have to wait as long to cruise out of the atmosphere. And by not waiting too long to cruise out of the atmosphere, you keep the rocket stable for longer. I am going to keep this mission's footage largely unedited, and by largely unedited I mean from this point on, because this is going to be the only thing that we do in today's episode, is just solely going to be on this mission, and we have made one flight to the Mun, I believe, in this pod. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this is the second flight to the Mun. This might be the first landing. No, this isn't the first landing. Is it the first landing? No, it isn't. I just had to go through to make sure. But yeah, no, this is going to be the second Mun landing that we do with this pod. But this pod has a lot of stuff that the first landing didn't have. We have aboard all the science materials and solar panels and communication dishes, the ground slam passometer, the seismographer machine. We have all that because we're going to be setting that up in another location on the Mun as well, because it's good to have two of those seismographers. And we also have a contract. We're not going to really address it in this episode. We'll look at it later. But we'll have a contract to start the setting up a Mun base. And while we're not anywhere there yet, we're going to be placing down these things in an approximate location of where we want the base, so that way we have a place to land at later when we are ready for those things. So now we are circularizing, not at the best angle or mode, so we end up having to add a little radial to our maneuver, but that could easily be fixed by just burning closer to the apoapsis. But I didn't do that. I didn't really pay attention. That is the one problem with doing missions, especially doing routine missions and repetitive actions, is sometimes you get a little too comfortable with your maneuvers. So now I'm going to be doing a lot more of our burns looking at the screens in here as opposed to in map view to see the circularization. As well as for the burn countdown. So we're doing it the old school method of splitting the time in half between the start of the node, or before the node starts and when the node ends. I readjusted my staging so that way I could deploy the fairing, because we got to space a little bit earlier than we expected. Go ahead and drop off that stage. Those side boosters, I should say. This part I could have sped up, but I already have all the audio in place. But, I mean, it's not too long of a burn. It's not like it's a nuclear engine or an ion engine or anything, so we can sit here and hang out with each other. How are you doing? And, with that, we are now in orbit. Well, soon we're in orbit. I don't know why I decided to stop early, but I go ahead and deploy since we're now safe in the atmosphere. And I did forget to put all those new solar panels on the deploy stage, so I go ahead and just do those manually. Now I'm just getting myself a little closer to the apoapsis, and we're just going to finish off our burn. Bring ourselves to orbit. It's looking pretty. Curving out the through the camera, and a little bit of light coming through the window. So now we're targeting the MUN, and we're changing our inclination because when it comes to probes or flybys or anything like that, it doesn't matter if we come in at a weird angle and then it sends us into a very eccentric loop around Kerbal. That doesn't matter. But when it comes to landing, we want to be nice and equatorial. We don't want, I mean, even with flybys, nice and equatorial is good, because then you don't get too dramatic of an orbit upon exit. But yeah, definitely when it comes to landing, having a pretty solid, pretty low inclination, relative inclination, is important. Okay, so we're just going to point ourselves anti-normal, and then at the appropriate time burn. I cranked down the thrust because we are still using our Pila engines from our lifter stage. So now getting ready to burn, and we burn, and just ever so slightly, and that brings us to 0.00, a couple numbers after that, and that gives us the appropriate angle. Look at that. Look how flat that is. That's great. So yeah, so we'll be coming in equatorially. I reset my thrust limiter because we're going to go through the first stage in doing this burn, so there's no need to make it last as long as possible because we'll have the next stage for that, which is, I believe, the Poodle engine. Wasn't a big fan of the Poodle engine this game. I used to use it as my upgraded Terrier engine, or Beagle engine actually, because that's what I use. But yeah, just in this series, it has been a little bit disappointing to me. It doesn't have a good enough thrust to weight ratio, and it seems like it takes longer than it used to. So I don't know. We'll probably figure something else out with that. See if there's a better engine design for these in-space maneuvers, these sub-nuclear, I guess. So yeah, so now we're just carefully moving our time warp forward so we can get close to our node, and then we fire. And now it's just a matter of getting ourselves to burn out to the mud and stop burning quickly enough that we can keep our low periapsis. That way we don't have to lower ourselves later. There goes the bottom stage. Couldn't see it through the camera because it was too dark. So yeah, so now I'm looking at that purple number. This is CLST APR, closest approach, and trying to get that as close to 20 kilometers as possible. And stop. 19. Good stuff. 1985. Excellent stuff. So what happens next is a little bit debatable on whether or not I should have continued on with it or not. But in a second here, you're going to hear my engines fire and my stages go, because my cat decided that was the time. Right there. My cat decided that that was the time to sit on my keyboard. So just instinctively, I reloaded the save, and then I thought about it. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have, but ultimately what I ended up deciding on was the Kerbals wouldn't have sat on the keyboard. They wouldn't have accidentally staged. In fact, it's a switch that they can't hit without purposeful intent. So, and we didn't lose much progress. It was just from the time that we were doing the inclination burn. So we're just gonna go with it. We ended up doing some cool stuff afterwards, so it's not too much of a loss. But again, yeah, it was one of those things. Oh, and I passed by where I'm supposed to burn. But it's one of those things that don't feel great about it, but I do feel like it's, at least there's a relative excuse. It's not like, oh, I staged too early, or like, oh, I miscalculated my burn or something. It's none of that. So here I'm just looking at some of the information that research bodies put up. I didn't notice those buttons before, so. So now we're time warping over to our maneuver. This was the transfer burn that we did just not too long ago. A quick save. I do like that there's a warning in the corner of this pod that says that it's not actually rated for re-entry. So we go ahead and get our Kerbal out. For some reason I wasn't sure why it wouldn't let me EVA. I was like, oh no, is the hatch obstructed? That's terrible. And then I realized, oh no, I was time warping. So we get our scientists out and try to see if we can collect any science. There's one that we can take. We want to, since we're going to be doing a lot of different science, we're going to be, oh here I'm trying to take an AmpYear report. But since we're doing a lot of science, we're going to need to collect the experiments. So that means that there's going to have to be some EVAing. Right there I was just changing seats for the engineer and the scientist. I like having the scientist in the seat by the snacks and the engineer in the seat with the computer. So, you know, since we're just going between planetary bodies, just kill the lights out a little bit. We don't need to have a full brightness, full cabin, full light in our cabin. Because it's not like they can really get up and do anything. They're going to be in their seats for this whole time. Probably be facing around talking to each other, I imagine. So yeah, so we start our burn, and it's going to be just pretty much like last time. Using up that lower stage. Going to end up making it space trash. It's just going to have a huge loop around Kerbal, but at this point we've kind of given up on the Kessler syndrome, because there's going to be a lot of junk in our orbits, our orbit. Yeah, once again, I'm just looking at that purple number on closest approach. There's a lot of different numbers you can look at when doing your burn. You can look at the delta V, you can look at the burn timer. When it comes to this, I like to look at that closest approach. So 1896, not as good as 1985, but I mean 1896 did give us Utah as a state and the very first Olympics, so I mean it's not all terrible. So now we're making our circularization burn, plotting it in. Just a little bit routine, and get it very low orbit around it, because we plan on landing pretty quickly, so no need to waste time. Oh, while we have a chance, I forgot to mention our Kerbals today are Arlie as the pilot, Lukey as the scientist, and Wenzon as the engineer. And I talked over it, but we looked at their stats at the beginning, and Wenzon is a badass. So I don't know how we keep getting these badasses in our midst, but we gotta do something to keep them safe, because every time we have a badass, we seem to kill them, and it's not a good track record. It's not good for our program. It's not good for anything. So yeah, so now we are changing sphere of influences. And I'm trying not to time warp too much, because the closer you get to the planet, the faster you go, and it's real easy to whip around. So then I get myself to what I think is about 3 seconds, and then I realize, no, that was 3 minutes. So I fast forward more. Then I just barely go over the time, so I have to really hit it. Alright, so yeah, so now we're coming in. Bringing our apoapsis down. Get a nice slow circularization. Just watching the circle get smaller. This Poodle engine doesn't have a lot of thrust to weight, but it is very efficient. There we go. Still got plenty of fuel. So go ahead and turn on the light. Oh, there's our Kerbal, if you can see in the middle. That was Wenzon. So we want to land somewhere near this crater, near that canyon, because then we can explore the canyon as well as the crater and possibly the area above it. This is meant to be a hopper, after all. And it's over-engineered. The Poodle engine will still have plenty of fuel left by the time we're ready to be landed. Like, actually, by the time we're actually landed, it should still have fuel left. But the goal is, primary objective, if we can, is to land with it, to have it survive the landing and just roll over on its side or something. And then it will be emergency fuels, you know, potentially. You know, it'll be there if we need it. And if this is where we're going to be starting our base, that means it's going to be relatively close. So that's nice. So yep, so now we're just doing our burn, bringing ourselves in for a landing. Turn on Flight Engineer, and it gives us the landing marker, which I enjoy. I do have trajectories installed, but for some reason it's not showing up. I prefer trajectories to the Flight Engineer, but this is what we got. So I go ahead for just a little bit of a manual burn. I turn myself normal. And I aim myself just ever so slightly between the two to slow down while still adjusting my trajectory to better hit that spot. So we're checking out the window of the mun, or the window at the mun. See it pass by. Gets a little blurry when we go through time warp. But we still have parallax installed, so it's going to be very, very interesting to see up close. So I tried to do some science above the surface, but apparently we've already done it. So, and it even says that we've done our materials bay, which I feel that that's not correct. But either way. So I go ahead and set my landing gear to auto deploy, so they will pop out at 2,000 meters. And I time warp myself, but I time myself way too quickly. I did not mean to press the button as many times as I did, and that becomes a problem. We passed the time when we're supposed to start our suicide burn, so we're late. We're late on it. And it's about this time when the computer starts freezing up. I have no control, I can't see anything. And I have no way of preventing what's about to happen. I was pretty screwed to begin with, but I do have engines right now. I do have reaction wheel, and I will have the ability control. I could save this. We could send a rescue mission out. That's not the problem. The problem is right about here is where my computer crashed completely. And when we returned, when we got the game loaded up again, all the Kerbals were dead. So that's going to be the end of this episode. If you liked it, you know, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to stop killing Kerbals, I'll tell you that much. But if you liked it, please consider giving me a like, and I will see you in the next one. We are going to figure out what happened, and we are going to try again, because that's the Kerbal way. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.